Hi, everybody. It's Tiffany Rousecolt, Director of SLCC's Writing Across the College program. I hope you're all doing well and you're safe and healthy. I've had a few requests for my desk manuals workshop that the WAC program has offered a few times over the last couple of years. And so, what I've decided to do is create a video workshop of it, and I've changed it slightly to just be about writing effective instructions, because that's really the basis of that desk manual workshop, and it might be more applicable to different situations as well. So let's get started. So the goals for this workshop are going to be: why do we need instructions? How to write instructions, specifically the content that you include. How to write instructions, specifically the writing strategies that you would need to use. We'll do a little bit of practice, and then we'll go over some common problems. Some of you might be familiar with the instructions activity where somebody writes instructions for how to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then somebody else has to follow it specifically. And the results are often very funny. The Instagram, Facebook, YouTube star Josh Darnett went viral with his exact instructions challenge with his kids. If you want to look it up, you can just look up Josh Darnett, and it's pretty funny, although sometimes torturous to see how he does this with his kids. But this is kind of the idea, that we want to write instructions that can be followed and result in the outcome that you intend. Okay, so why do we have instructions in the workplace? So first of all, there's desk manuals, and that's kind of the primary reason that I get calls for about writing instructions. And desk manuals are basically instructions for the daily activities that you might engage in your job that somebody else might need to take over should you be absent. Also, procedures, so how things are to be done. This is sometimes also known as department rules, so how a specific area goes about their tasks or the rules that they follow. Obviously, instructions are very useful in training materials. And then websites as well. We have outward facing websites where we're instructing students to do things, or we're instructing faculty to do things, or even other staff members. And all of these require instructions that are easy to follow and result in the outcomes that you want. So how to write instructions? There's two main elements here. First is the content, and then next will be the writing strategies. We're going to talk about content first. So the elements of instructions are not just the steps, not just the day, not just the, 1, 2, 3, what you need to do. Okay, so let's go over these elements. First, instructions should have an introduction. This describes the purpose or the need for the duty or task, the thing that you're trying to provide instructions for. So instead of just handing a list of steps, you'll want to explain, what is this? So is this entering a student into Banner? Is it scheduling faculty for their courses? What is this instruction? Next, there needs to be some warnings or cautions, and these prevent informational, relational, or physical harm. So physical harm is the obvious one. You don't want to use corrosive materials or sharp equipment without caution. But also, there might be informational needs that you should caution against. So, for example, there's FERPA policy that prevents private information from being shared. Also, relational warnings and cautions may be something like if you're working with different staff members or different administrators, are there certain expectations that certain individuals have or need that you would want the person following the instructions to be aware of? Next, there's necessary background. So this is knowledge that's essential to understanding the instructions. So, for example, does the person following the instructions need to know certain banner forms, or do they need to know how to access Canvas? Do they need to know how to run a particular piece of equipment? Do they need to know how to get into a particular building? So this is, what do they need to know in order to be able to follow the instructions. Next are any equipment or supplies that might be needed. This is pretty straightforward if you need certain equipment, but think of what software is needed or if there's any materials that are needed. And then the part of the instructions that we kind of more associate with the term instructions are the steps. So these are each step that somebody needs to follow to complete the instructions. Now, writing strategies are equally important with writing instructions as in addition to the content. How we write instructions has a big impact on how successful they are in having the person accomplish what you want them to accomplish. So the first thing is to write in second person voice. Now, second person voice is when it's written directly to the reader. It's an implied you. Another term for this verb tense is called the imperative. Now, in English, we don't have to use the word you in our sentences. So, for example, a stop sign just says stop. That's an imperative verb saying you stop. So, if an instruction might be to, open up a file, your instruction should say open a file, not the file should be opened. So you want to be speaking directly to the reader so that they are receiving the commands that you're giving them through the instructions. In addition to that, start with verbs. Now, when you're writing in that imperative voice, you're going to naturally start with verbs, as long as you drop that you, as long as you don't include you in it, which would end up sounding silly anyway. So like you open the file, you click on this. So you don't need the you. But so you'll begin sentences with the action word. So what is it that the instruction, what is the action that the instruction is saying to do? So open a file, use the key to open the door, enter the student's name, call the faculty member. So every sentence in those steps should begin with an action word. Next, with lists, instructions are very often done in lists. Use numbers in those lists and not bullets. With bullets are used to separate different elements of a list, but they don't indicate an order. Now, we might think that reading from top to bottom does indicate an order, but you can jump around with bulleted lists. With numbered lists, it's very apparent that you should go from number 1 to number 2 to number 3, and so on. Next, if your instructions are fairly in-depth, it's very useful to break up the steps into sections. So it might be opening a file, and then what are all the steps that take place in there? Then it might be entering the data. How do you enter the data? Then it might be saving the file, and how do you save the file? So use headings to separate your steps, and that will make following your instructions much, much clearer. Next, instructions need to be succinct. And I think the best way to describe that is to be detailed. Make sure that you cover everything, but don't add any additional words. Don't add words that might make your instructions fuzzier or more confusing. Now, I can't tell you exactly how to do that, but I will give you some examples about how to make sure that your instructions are succinct in a couple more slides. Also, use images in your instructions. You can use screen clips or screen grabs that you annotate, meaning that you lay arrows or circles on them, or perhaps they're filled out forms. There might be images of materials that are used. That phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, absolutely is true with writing instructions. Okay, so we're going to do some practice now. So this is a really poorly written set of instructions on getting ready for work, and the task is brushing your teeth. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read these instructions, and I'd like you to analyze just how bad they are. And as you're doing this, here are the elements that we just reviewed with the elements, the content of the instructions, and the writing strategies of the instructions. And it might be good for you to pause the video here for a moment, take a moment and just look at the instructions, look at those elements and writing strategies, and how many things can you find that are wrong with these instructions or are poorly done. So take a moment, and then when you're ready, go ahead and restart the video. Okay, so here's some very common findings about the problems with these instructions. So first of all, there's no warnings. There's no warnings about swallowing the toothpaste. There's no warnings about how hard to brush the teeth. There's no warnings about anything at all. So warnings really need to be a part of brushing your teeth. There's nothing written in here about the equipment that is necessary, like the water. This is just, you've got a toothbrush and toothpaste, and you just get started. While that is possible, it's not the most pleasant way to brush your teeth. These instructions don't explain why it's important to brush your teeth. It's important to brush your teeth every day, but why? Is somebody really going to be motivated to do these instructions correctly if they don't know why they're doing them? Obviously, how much toothpaste should be used? Do we need, I don't know, a little tiny smidgen like kids tend to do? Or do we need, to fill up the entire brush? How much do we need? How long should we brush? There's no indication of how long it should take place for. We could do it for 10 seconds like my son does, or we could do it for, 5 to 10 minutes and end up injuring our gums. Step number 3 is not written in second person. 1, 2, and 4 are, with those verbs right there, but 3 is written in the passive voice. The mouth should be rinsed. What this means is that the subject of this sentence is unknown. So who should rinse the mouth? Should somebody else come in and rinse out your mouth? Not really sure. So that one you would need to change to rinse the mouth. Where should the toothpaste be put? I assume it's on the brushes, but if I'd never done this before, I'm not sure where, whether that would take place. It might be put on the handle. Would an image help with this? Very much. It would probably help with this very much. Then it says clean the toothbrush, but how do you clean the toothbrush? Do you rub it on the carpet, through your hair? Exactly how do you clean that toothbrush? And then this is a mistake here. I wrote numbers instead of bullets. I wasn't paying attention to my own PowerPoint. There are numbers here. I thought it was bullets as I was preparing this. So the numbers are good. Just a reminder to have numbers. Okay, so obviously really poor instructions. So the next slide is going to go through a revised set of instructions that are not perfect, but they're a lot better. So with this one, you see that we've got the image there. Let's start at the top. So we have brushing teeth. That's your introduction. It's important to brush your teeth in the morning so that you are ready to greet students with a bright smile. Now that's just a little cheesy, I know. It probably should be something about brushing your teeth in the morning so that you have good dental hygiene and keep all your teeth until you are ripe old age. There's one warning here about being careful not to brush too forcefully. Doing so can damage your gums. There's equipment, toothbrush, toothpaste, and water. And then we've got 9 steps. 1 is to grasp the toothbrush in one hand and use the other hand to squeeze a pea-sized amount of toothpaste onto the toothbrush bristles. 2, gently run water over the toothpaste onto the bristles. 3, brush the teeth in gentle circular motions. Be sure to brush the fronts, backs, tops, and bottoms of teeth. And this is where the image comes in handy. 4, you can also gently brush your tongue, gums, and roof of your mouth. Now there's a warning here that says do not swallow the toothpaste. Spit out the foam as you brush. Then 6, continue brushing for at least 2 minutes. Do not exceed 5 minutes. 7, spit out contents into sink or other appropriate receptacle. 8, rinse out mouth with water. 9, rinse off toothbrush and return to holder. So again, these are not perfect instructions. Some previous workshop participants have pointed out that in the equipment, what's missing is like a sink or somewhere to spit the water into or where to get the water from. Although that shows that these instructions could also be useful for somebody who was camping and didn't have a sink available. Also, there's questions about why the warnings, why there's 2 separate warnings. The reason I put the warning under number 5 into do not swallow toothpaste, spit out the foam as you brush, is because that's when the brushing is taking place. You would swallow it while you're brushing, although this warning could come at the beginning as well. You could have, be careful not to brush too forcefully, and do not swallow the toothpaste. Either way would be absolutely fine. Um, I think that was the main concerns that I've experienced with previous workshop participants, but I'm sure that you could improve on these instructions if you were wanting to write them yourself. So, but this shows how these are better than the previous ones. Now here's some common problems and how to avoid them with writing instructions. First is not including all the steps. This happens a lot when we're writing instructions for activities that we're very, very familiar with. So if there's a certain task that you do over and over and over again, it becomes subconscious. The steps that you go through, you actually don't see anymore. And so we often miss them when we're writing the instructions. So the way to avoid this problem is to share your instructions with someone after you've drafted them and have them follow them exactly and see what happens. Next is overlooking very small details. This is the same problem as not including all of the steps. It's because you're very used to it and you really just, these become automatic behaviors and automatic activities. And so therefore you just won't include them. Another way to try to avoid this is to write the instructions as you're actually doing a task and see how many things you actually do. Another way to do it is to share them with someone, okay? Next is if you provide too much information. This might happen when you're concerned that somebody really may not understand what all the details are, and you end up giving too much information, and that bogs down the clarity of the instructions. The only way to deal with this is to, yes, we're seeing a pattern here, to share them with someone. Instructions are probably one of the most important genres of writing that you must share with people in order to make sure that they work. Another problem is if you have a disorganized presentation. This might happen because as you're writing your instructions, you're going through the steps and then you remember perhaps a small detail or you remember a step that you've left out and you kind of shove it in there and things get disorganized. So again, no surprise here, you need to share them with someone. And I encourage you to share them with two types of people. First, share them with someone who understands your job and knows how to do your job, and they might be able to fill in some gaps for you in sort of a collaborative brainstorming manner. But then it's very important to share them with someone who doesn't know your job and have them follow the steps exactly. Finally, we can slip very easily into not using second person you and active verbs as we're drafting. That's fine. Just have somebody look at it, or you could look at it yourself actually, and just see if you are using the active verbs at the beginning of all of your steps, and then give them to somebody and have somebody else review that for you as well. Ultimately, the main way to deal with any problems with instructions is to do what Josh Darnett does and have somebody follow the instructions exactly and see what happens. And you will find where you've made the missteps. You'll figure out how to remedy those missteps, and then you'll have a really solid set of instructions. Another resource for you is me and the Writing Across the College program. I've done this with many people after these workshops where you can, I welcome you to send, I welcome you, I invite you to send me drafts of your instructions that you're putting together. I will do a pretty quick turnaround and give you feedback on them, and then you can revise them, you can send them back to me, and we can just go back and forth until you feel satisfied with your instructions. I hope that this was helpful for you. Again, call me or send me an email with any questions that you might have. And I hope to get back to in-person workshops soon. Take care of yourselves.